A very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new episode of Africa Today, our show that brings you all the latest news and developments happening in the African continent. I'm Angie Meher joining you for today's edition of the show. And as usual, we begin straight away with a look at some of the news making the headlines, beginning with news from home, where Egypt is amongst the countries most exposed to the ongoing Gulf-related crisis. And this statement was made by Deniz Denya, the Senior Executive Vice President of the African Export-Import Bank. Denya highlighted the country's frontline position due to its geographic proximity to the conflict zones and its dependence on tourism and energy imports. Speaking during a media briefing, Denya said that the bank is working closely with the Egyptian government and national institutions to mitigate the impact of the situation in the region under a $10 billion crisis response program launched by the Afrexim Bank. The bank reported strong financial results for 2025, with total assets exceeding $48.5 billion, a 21% increase over 2024. A cargo corridor between Egypt and Italy is receiving much attention due to the regional developments. The route serves destinations including the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Oman, Iraq and Qatar, creating a strategic land and sea bridge between Europe and the Gulf through North Africa. We have the details in this report.
Egypt is strengthening its Ro-Ro cargo corridor linking Damietta port with Italy's Trieste port to provide a safer and more efficient supply chain. Disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz have sharply decreased shipping traffic, raised insurance premiums, and increased trade costs globally, particularly affecting African importers. Egypt is positioning itself as a central logistics hub between Europe and Africa, with ambitions to boost trade flows and increase its economic significance in the region. According to shipping data, disruption in the Strait of Hormuz has sharply increased global trade costs, with only 5 to 7 ships passing daily, compared with the usual 140 to 178 vessels, while more than 230 oil tankers were stranded and 37 vessels were redirected. War risk insurers' premiums rose from 0.15% to as high as 5% to 10% of hull value, pushing losses into tens of billions of dollars and increasing fuel and shipping costs for African importers. Egypt, which also serves as home to the Suez Canal, one of the world's most important trade arteries, is facing additional pressure from the crisis, while the European Union is also grappling with tighter energy supplies and higher freight costs. The Ro-Ro corridor links Damietta port on the Mediterranean with the Italian port of Trieste, before cargo is transported across Egypt to Safaga port on the Red Sea and shipped onward to Gulf markets. The route serves destinations including the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Oman, Iraq and Qatar, creating a strategic land and sea bridge between Europe and the Gulf through North Africa.
And for more on this, we're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by our guest for the afternoon, Dr. Ayman Ghoneim, our economic and legal expert. Dr. Ayman, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you, madam.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your time this afternoon. Now, this cargo corridor between Egypt and Italy has been receiving much attention, of course, due to the regional developments. How do you see this specific corridor as an alternate route, specifically with the Strait of Hormuz now being disrupted and the maritime flow being disrupted in the region and the world as a whole?
Well, actually, we know quite well that with every opportunity, with every problem comes an opportunity. And now, of course, we all face the problem of the war in the Middle East, the war in the Gulf.
Yes.
And such war actually had a negative impact on all the trade routes, especially those that cross the Strait of Hormuz. And this affected the Suez Canal, which is one of the most important trade arteries in the world.
Yes.
And this is expecting also to continue affecting the revenues of Suez Canal for some time. Because we know that the oil tankers that pass through the Strait of Hormuz, they come to Suez Canal and they cross Suez Canal and then they go either to Southern Europe or North America. So one of the alternatives that Egypt is now exploring is to try to find an opportunity out of this problem. And the opportunity here is to serve as an alternate trade route for cargo between the Gulf and Europe and America. But of course, one of the trade routes would be the roll-on, roll-off cargo corridor between Egypt and Italy. Of course, roll-on, roll-off means that the cargo can be driven through cars or through trucks to the vessel and then driven out of the vessel when the vessel reaches its destination.
Right.
So the alternative here is that we can use such trade route and receive cargoes and send cargo to Europe and to the US, maybe through the Safaga port on the Red Sea, and then from Safaga to Damietta, the cargo can be driven from Safaga port on the Red Sea to Damietta port on the Mediterranean, and then from Damietta to the Italian port of Trieste, and then from Italy to the other part of Europe. This is one of the plans, this is one of the alternatives that now Egypt is actively exploring.
Right, indeed. Dr. Ayman, now if, the regional war risk premiums continue to remain at their high levels and high percentages, do you think Egypt is prepared to scale this route further and use it to provide more of a safe route and an alternative route to the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, actually, this depends on the type of cargo we're talking about. Because, of course, if we're talking about the oil shipment, then they need oil pipes. They need the construction of oil pipes all through Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea, and then from the Red Sea they can be shipped to Egypt, and this takes time. But as an alternative route, presently for the cargo, for the merchandise cargo, then of course such trade route on the short run can serve as an alternative from Damietta to Italy. You know that the Strait of Hormuz, according to Reuters actually, previously they used to receive around 140 to 180 vessels per day. Used to cross them. Now the strait only 5 to 7 vessels per day are crossing, according to Reuters. And such a disruption actually is creating a lot of backlog for the shipments and for the cargo shipments, for the merchandise in the Gulf. And that's why they are looking for such alternative trade routes.
Yes, absolutely right. In another topic, Dr. Ayman, Egypt has been identified by the Afrexim Bank as being on the front line, of course, of the current, Gulf-related crisis, being affected due to the geography as well as the energy dependencies. Now, the bank recently arranged a $2 billion syndicated loan involving 31 global financial institutions. Tell me, sir, how does this high level, what does this rather high level of international oversubscription, if you may, signal about the global investor confidence in African multilateral institutions, in your opinion, sir?
Well, actually, Egypt is now getting the fruits of its wise economic diplomacy that started since 2014, since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was elected for the presidency. Egyptian economic diplomacy has been trying to build strong and stable and also balanced relationships between different parties, between different global powers, and with different international and regional financial institutions, including, of course, the African Development Bank and the African Export-Import Bank. That's one thing. And second, the present chaos or the present tumult in the Middle East, it shows quite well that Egypt is the island of stability and security in the whole region.
Yes, absolutely.
And actually, this is one of the assets of Egypt: its stability, its security, its the strength of its army, and the coherence of its people. That's why amid such turbulent conditions, you can find a lot of investors, they trust Egypt the most. Of course, the African Export-Import Bank has arranged such facility because Egypt now is eligible for such facility, for such relief facilities, mainly because of the disruption in the trade routes and the reduction in the revenues of Suez Canal, which is one of the most important trade arteries in the world.
Absolutely.
More than 11% of the international trade used to pass through Suez Canal. Of course, predominantly the oil exportation to Europe and to North America. We know that the Gulf countries, they control more than 25 to 30% of the oil production in the world, and more than 20% of the liquefied natural gas exportation. Of course, the loss of such amount, the loss of the revenues of such transportation massively affected the revenues of Suez Canal. And of course, this would impact the Egyptian economy. Of course, we're trying to withstand such problems, and we're trying to build resilience, and we're trying to look for different...
To mitigate, the results.
We're trying to look for different alternatives, as you said, to mitigate the effect of such problems. But of course, in the short run, we would definitely need such relief finance packages.
Absolutely. Now, of course, as you mentioned, Doctor, the Afrexim Bank also said beyond the immediate $10 billion US dollars in the response program, they're also helping Egypt transition from what they called crisis management to long-term structural resilience against the regional volatility. How important is this part of the address?
Well, actually, talking about the long-term resilience of the Egyptian economy, here we're talking about the diversification of the Egyptian economy and its attempt, or the attempt of Egypt to transform from a previous year-and-tier of economy into a manufacturing, exportation, and a service economy, into an exporting economy. Of course, this will be a long-term quest. This is not something on the short run.
Indeed.
And this requires a lot of structural changes, which we are now actively engaging. One of the important structural changes is to invest more in our infrastructure. We did invest, of course, in the infrastructure since 2014, since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was elected. We did invest in our road networks, in the construction
transportation and ports. Yes,
in the construction of new cities, in the construction of power plants, and in the construction of power networks. But we need more in order to support the transformation of the Egyptian economy into a manufacturing-based economy and service-based economy. And actually, this is our long-term strategy, or actually it is our medium-term strategy by which we aspire by 2030 to increase the contribution of manufacturing industries to around 20% of our GDP. In doing so, we need to cooperate with different international financial organizations, including, of course, our regional financial institutions like the Afrexim Bank and the African Development Bank.
Right, we'll leave it at that. Dr. Ayman Ghoneim, our economic and legal expert. Many thanks, sir, for your time and your insight, and for joining us this afternoon on Africa Today. We still move to more news in the African continent. The United Nations has warned that the conflict in Sudan is leading 70% of the population of the country into poverty, which is almost double the pre-war levels. More details to follow.
Nearly 70% of people in Sudan are now living in poverty, almost double pre-war levels, as conflict continues to devastate the country's economy and social fabric. According to Luca Renda of the United Nations Development Programme, poverty has surged from about 38% before the war to an estimated 70% today. The figures are based on a threshold of roughly $4 per day, with at least a quarter of the population surviving on less than half that amount. Conditions are particularly severe in areas such as South Kordofan and North Darfur, where up to 3/4 of residents face extreme deprivation. These regions remain among the most affected by ongoing fighting. Now in its fourth year, the war between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces has killed tens of thousands and displaced more than 11 million people. Hunger and famine conditions have spread across multiple regions, with over 21 million people facing severe food insecurity. The UN warns that incomes have fallen to levels not seen since 1992, with extreme poverty now worse than in the 1980s.
And for our final news item, Mali's Tuareg rebels announced that they are in control of a key Mali town after attacks on strategic hunter positions across the country. Several strategic towns and areas around the capital Bamako were targeted in a dawn offensive earlier in the week. We have the details.
Insurgents and Tuareg separatists in Mali have taken control of the key northern town of Kidal after coordinated attacks on strategic junta positions across the country. 2 days of fierce fighting between the army and rebels allied with Tuareg have plunged the junta-led West African country into uncertainty over the military government's future. Several strategic towns and areas around the capital Bamako were targeted in a dawn offensive on Saturday. Residents also confirmed seeing Malian soldiers and their Russian mercenary backers leaving the town. The FLA, a separatist group claiming the territory of Azawad in northern Mali, had said over the weekend that it had total control of Kidal, marking a major blow to Mali's military junta. Kidal, a pro-independence stronghold, had been under the control of rebel groups for years before being retaken in November 2023 in a Malian army offensive, supported by Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group. Its recapture was widely hailed across Mali as a symbolic success.
With that, we wrap up the afternoon's edition of Africa Today. You were in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Many thanks for watching, and do stay tuned for more coming your way on Nile TV International.